you can really run a complex, challenging, and what in the past has sometimes be looked at as dangerous or risky manufacturing operation, like a chemical manufacturing operation. You can do it very safely, you can do it very successfully, and you can do it in a way that can be profitable, but be responsible and be a good part of the community.
Hey, it's Ari Santiago, President, CEO of IT Direct. Welcome to this episode of Made in America. I'm really excited. I'm sitting with Frank DiCristina from allnex right here in Connecticut. Frank's got a really interesting story, traveled all over the country working, ended up here in Connecticut, and just doing some really fascinating things as site manager in Wallingford. Can't wait to hear his views and what he has to say. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Ari. Pleasure to be here.
Listen, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start out with the same two questions. What do you guys make? And why do you make it?
So we make coating resins in Wallingford, part of a large company, global company, but we have a substantial site here and been there for almost 80 years. And coating resins are used in any type of paint or deck stain or coating application. So whether it's an automobile or furniture, can coatings, again, deck stains, there is a component in there that's a resin that we make here in Wallingford, as well as at all of our other allnex sites across the world. And what it does is it provides protection, right? So, you want that car to last for many years when you make that type of investment. You want that piece of furniture you buy to last long and look well. And you want any type of other product that you purchase that has a coating to hold up to the sun, ultraviolet exposure to weather, especially here, as we know. So that's what it's about: is making things last longer and bringing more value to the consumer.
So normally we're going to find allnex products inside of other products. No one at the retail level. No one's buying an allnex product directly, but it's in all the products and that we buy in other ways.
That's right. Just about everything you buy and touch will have it, but it's through a supply chain that we're buried in.
That we're part of.
Yeah.
So listen, I mean, clearly you have not been at allnex for 80 years.
Right.
But it's just always fascinating, I think, to me and to the Made in America audience. Like, what's kind of the background? What's the why? How did it get started? And, as best you can, kind of help us understand, how do we get to where we are today?
So originally the site was started by American Cyanamid on December 8th, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor.
That's
so
right.
Back page buried, but didn't make the paper. And it was a site that was seen as a good location to put a chemical plant that, the resources were there, the space was there. And interestingly enough, also the workforce was seen as being there. But it grew quickly over the decades, and they actually had to recruit from the outside. A lot of the workforce actually came from Maine eventually, is what I've understood, and grew up to about 800 to 1,000 employees at its peak in the 70s and 80s. And then, of course, like other manufacturing, especially chemical manufacturing, the dynamics around that change. So, you start to automate, you start to make things smaller, not bigger. And so we're not quite as big anymore, but we still have a vibrant, successful operation there.
Yeah. So what is the allnex kind of facility size, scale, scope, employee base? What does that look like today?
So we're actually a split facility. Allnex owns the facility, is the larger operation on site, and then there's a sister operation called Rome now that makes a different product. They were divested years ago. So overall, we're about 200 on the site in total. Allnex is about 110, 112 in size right now, and so that's where we've been for the last 5-10 years.
And so how did we get from where we started as a privately held company to now kind of part of this global operation? And where does the kind of Wallingford site sit in kind of the global landscape of the company?
Yeah, so there's 32 manufacturing sites, 7 in the U.S. Wallingford is one of the 2 largest sites in the U.S. And Advent International is the private equity owner that you referred to, and bought us in 2013, and has really invested in trying to grow the business again. Has reinvested in the Wallingford site. We've been able to bring in several new products in the past few years, so we're excited about that. But there's puts and takes. There's some products that age and mature, and then we're trying to backfill with exciting new products that are really provide new functionality, more environmentally friendly. Allnex is really into focusing on greener products, bringing environmentally friendly solutions to the market, because that's what customers are asking for.
Absolutely. And I know there's a lot going on there. We talked in the past about kind of the wastewater treatment plant you guys got going and your involvement in the Wallingford, public schools and kind of workforce development, engagement with the community and the environment and educating on all that. And I want to get to all that. Yeah. So that was a little teaser preview.
Yeah.
But it's also really interesting to kind of get the background. Here you are kind of running this site. So, you're responsible kind of keeping this site running. People that are listening might be able to pick up a slight accent that we can hear. So maybe you from Connecticut? Are you from Connecticut, or what's kind of your background?
No, actually from the South, from Louisiana, New Orleans, born and bred, and went to Tulane University, and then ventured out. Decided to see what was out there career-wise, opportunity-wise, and went to work in Maine for a couple of years. That was interesting.
One extreme to the other, the southern border to the northeastern border.
Moved in right about this time, in the middle of January. Perfectly timed.
That's right. Welcome to the Northeast, Frank. Bring your jacket.
That's right. Yeah. But we did enjoy it, and that company moved me around to a couple spots in Delaware, mid-coast region. Or mid-America region. And then I took another move out to Las Vegas, believe it or not. And there are chemical plants.
The bayou, to the forest, to the desert, yeah.
I live in all the sinful places, right? New Orleans, Las Vegas, Connecticut. No.
There you go. Okay.
So that was interesting as well. And then Chemtura, which was actually based in Middlebury at the time, has since been bought out and no longer based there, but I went to work for them, but in Arkansas. The facility that I worked at was actually in southern Arkansas. So I've gone from all the extremes, New Orleans, New England, Vegas, rural America, and now Connecticut, and really enjoyed it here for almost 8 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Brought your family up, and how'd they take to all that moving?
They've been resilient, and they really like it here, actually. They've kind of dug in, and they're, my 3 kids, their formative years have been here, and feel like they're rooted in here now.
That's exciting. So let's talk about kind of your journey. I mean, when you started you've been kind of in this industry the whole time. So where'd you start, and kind of how'd you get from where you started to, site manager of a really important U.S. site for an international organization?
So I started with Monsanto in Louisiana. We were making herbicides and pool chemicals. I was in the pool chemicals portion of it, which was kind of interesting. And as a chemical engineer, did projects for them, process improvements, and then ended up doing a very large expansion, $40 million expansion, about 5-6 years into my career there. And that went well. He started it up. It was exciting, delivered to a new customer, and then was able to progress into supervisory type roles of supervising the facility that we expanded. And then again, I decided to take a career move and move into a production management role for a carrageenan producer, FMC it was called at the time. And carrageenan, actually extracting carrageenan from seaweed. Believe it or not, it's a chemical process, but you extract it out and make what's a thickening agent for milks and toothpaste and yogurts and various other types of foods. A lot of products that you walk into the store and consume, and you look at the label and it's on there. So that was quite interesting and different, kind of a shift from pool chemicals to food and toothpaste ingredients, as well as pharmaceutical products as well. So did that for a few years, almost 4.5, 5 years. And then in Vegas, it was a chloralkali facility. So they actually make chlorine and sodium hydroxide. That is a commodity chemical, building block chemical that's used in again a lot of different applications, pool chemicals included there. And then Chemtura was making flame retardant type products. So, for product safety in, again, a broad, application, broad variety of applications, whether it was building materials or in consumer products that you want to make sure that from a flame retardancy standpoint, they were safe. So that was, again, a little bit of a shift, but very interesting as well. And then here, again, with coming here with resins and protecting the product that the consumers use.
How did you get hooked up with allnex?
Through a recruiter, the opportunity was brought to me, and it sounded neat and interesting, and it was a kind of a challenge in that we were trying to, in being bought and converting to this new owner, trying to, make the company more attractive or the site more attractive to the new owner. And we've been able to do that.
That's pretty exciting. Well, how did you guys do that? So the new owners come in, they recruit you, saying, hey, Frank, we want to come out here. We want to make this Wallingford site something they want to invest in and they want to grow. Sounds like that was kind of one of the goals.
Yeah. And, so we had a bit of a cost challenge, as a lot of manufacturing in the U.S. has had, and having to become more flexible, able to make, again, a different variety of products and use technology, use exciting new technological advances to make it more efficient, more productive, and we've been higher quality as well. And we've been able to do that the past several years.
Can you let's dive into that a little bit? So you kind of come in here. When you first get here, what does it look like? How do you start figuring out, all right, what are we going to change first?
Yeah, so part of it was, looking at how can we make the product more consistent. And, there's automation. We did have quite a bit of automation in place, but not as advanced as we'd liked it to be at the time. So our process control engineers started looking at, okay, how do we make we make 90 different products here. How do we make them all more consistent and robust? So it's implementing process control automation and at the basic level, but then even getting more sophisticated, we've started to use data analytics, models that try to be predictive in how your process is running and looking for that edge, looking for how do you find that sweet spot in the operation to make that product repeatedly consistent and high quality and effective for the customer. And then higher type of analytical methods in the analysis of the product. So whereas in the historical legacy type methods that we use are based on titrations and chemical, the
little beakers and all
yeah,
that stuff, right? Like our whole chemistry class.
That's right. Now we're using near-infrared spectrometry, NIR as it's called, which is sort of looking at a sort of a fingerprint for the molecule and trying to compare it to past production and make sure that it's matching. It's that fingerprint is the same, so the product is consistent. And with that, the customer's seeing a consistent, product coming into them, which allows their production line to be even more
efficient.
Yeah.
So that sort of you can sort of flow down or flow up, however you want to do that.
Yeah.
Flow up, kind of your consistency, your quality actually drives value to the customer, but let them automate even more.
That's right. Exactly.
So when you came in, was automation the first thing you looked at? Like, what was when you come in here, you've got 100 and 200 people at the site. You're trying to figure out how do we make this thing work better. Did you guys start off running like Kaizen events, lean events? Did you just do surveys? Like how did you sort of get in and get your hands dirty? Let's get into it.
Sure. Yeah, there was some of those tools were used, different names, but in effect the same. Yeah, in effect the same. Using those types of lean and Kaizen type tools. We called it TOP or what's called workout. It was the homemade terminology, but it's the same basic principles, looking at where the efficiencies in the process that you can take advantage of and then automate and make it, again, repeatable, consistent, and allow the customer to be able to capitalize on that by not having to change their process because you're giving them a
more consistent
repeatable.
product. Were there any other items that you guys looked to change in those first few years to really show the value of the site?
Yeah, so part of it was becoming more flexible in the processes that are made in the different production lines. So, at times in the past, they were somewhat rigid. These products can only be made here in this production line. And we started to look at, is there some more flexibility so you can take advantage of, as the market changes, customers at times, are looking for one product line, but then they may, their market changes, their customers are asking for a little more of this product. So not being limited and only being able to make certain products in certain lines, bringing that flexibility to the marketplace. And so having to adapt a product from one line into another line so you can take advantage of the capacity that's available in your process.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, that's important. And you were able to execute on that, and that worked out super well for you guys.
Yeah, definitely. So we have, a whole new product line that we were able to bring in and utilize a production line that had been idled, wasn't as utilized because that product had kind of dwindled, had become commoditized and not as desired in the marketplace. So we were able to bring in this product. Our engineers developed it. Engineers and chemists developed it. We started making trial batches in 2015, early 2016. The customer would take the product and evaluate it in their applications, which is very sensitive because it's in can coatings. So, they have to test it in making sure that the product is going to be safe when their customers use the can soup applications, right? And chicken soup happens to be the most aggressive type, so they test everything with chicken soup.
What's up with chicken soup?
Apparently, it's the most acidic and aggressive on the can. So if your coating in that can hold up to chicken soup, then it can hold up to all the varieties of soup. So that's how they test it out, and they were doing multiple trials with multiple batches of product that we were sending them over the course of 6 to 9 months. And once they determined that, hey, that our formulation was holding up to the products that they were trying to provide to their customers, then they started accepting that product on a regular basis. And now it's one of our larger product lines that we're able to sell.
That's great. Was there a lot of challenges in getting people kind of trained up to run different processes on the same lines and kind of move that through? And how about on the equipment, just having the different, formulas coming through?
Yeah, there's some challenges there, but what we had is a pretty robust system of what's called a MTS training system that goes into the technology behind the process. So it gives the operator a understanding of how it works in the background, so the fundamentals of how to make the product, and then translate it into how they're going to utilize it in the operation, in the production line that we make it, how they're going to apply it. So they are understanding what they're making, not just turning knobs, not just dialing, different conditions. They can see the variation that may be in the process and adapt because they understand the background behind it.
Mm-hmm. And so was that new technology that you brought under your regime to kind of the facility, or was it a new utilization of existing technology to make that happen?
It was technology that was developed actually in one of our sites in Germany. Okay. They were already making that product line for different customers, but in the U.S. it hadn't been accepted yet, and the customer became interested in it. So we brought it over, but we had to tweak it. It wasn't exactly the same. We had to make some changes to fit our production line and to fit what the customer wanted. Sure. And interestingly enough, there were some, initial challenges that didn't quite work well. The initial production of, the cans with our resin didn't quite work out just right. There were some concerns on how the cans were holding up. So we made some tweaks and were able to successfully, make it for the customer to where they liked it. And 4 years later,
here we are. So I kind of imagine in all the industries you've worked in your career, pool chemicals and all that stuff, including what we're doing at allnex, environmental concerns got to be big on the site.
Sure.
So, are there concerns in on the Wallingford site in terms of like how you guys are dealing with this? I would imagine there are. How kind of historically has the site dealt with that, and what do you guys do today?
So we use chemicals that certainly, if not handled properly, can have an impact on the environment. But we have very robust systems, and we use what's called process hazard analysis to evaluate as we implement these processes, what are the risks and how do you mitigate those, and put in engineering controls and more control systems, automated systems, what's called interlocks and interlocks and environmental control systems on the back end,
Sure.
to prevent any variation that's going to cause a release of chemicals
Variation in what?
in the process. So these processes are not always perfectly lined out, right? There's conditions that can vary, and you have to monitor that and control it and prevent the process from going out of control, from going
The
beyond.
process meaning what? We're putting two different chemicals together and we're waiting for a
Yeah.
reaction. So that's like the process we're monitoring.
Right. You have a reaction. You have some, different byproducts that are generated, and if they're not controlled and, handled properly, you could end up having an impact. So we do a real thorough job in developing these processes, making sure that it's stable and controlled, and understanding when it's not going to be stable. What does the equipment, what does the control system have to do to get it back in line? So it's really amazing how our engineers are able to assess that and make sure that it doesn't get into that type of situation.
What kind of volume of chemicals? Like, I mean, I don't know how you guys measure it, gallons, tons, or whatever. What kind of volume are we talking about?
Yeah, so tons, 30,000 metric tons a year typically is what we make. So
That sounds like a lot.
it is a lot. Yeah, it is a
Yeah.
lot. So if you think of one
A
of those
whole lot.
chemical tankers that are on the road,
Sure.
that has
like an 18-wheeler type truck that has the chemical tankers.
with the stainless steel chemical tankers, that typically has about 2 to 4 tons of product in those tankers. So we're making 30,000 metric tons a year. So if you do the math, it ends up being a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of
like
tankers.
1,500 of those tankers. A year.
Yeah. That's a lot of tankers. Wow. And so there's the systems there that are kind of monitoring these reactions or these chemical mixes as they're happening to really make sure that they're safe. I'm sort of in my mind envisioning like a scene of like a power plant or like a reactor that they're monitoring, that kind of like approach to keeping it safe and either adding or mixing or whatever you need to do to address something that may be getting out of control.
Yeah, it's certainly not to the level of a
Yeah,
nuclear power plant reactor,
Sure.
but similar concepts.
Yeah.
And a lot of investment in those engineering controls to make sure that it's safe. So we've put in $1 to $2 million a year in environmental control systems to exactly prevent that potential event and have a safe operation that delivers product at a cost effective and consistent way for our customers.
And listen, the results speak for themselves. So there's been no major leak, no major fire on this
that's
site.
right.
So seems like we're doing something correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a very highly trained hazmat response team on site, basically a full-fledged fire department that they do their regular job during the day. They're operators and mechanics and what have you. But if there's an incident, they're trained to get down there, get in the emergency response equipment and respond and mitigate the incident. And they've done a great job. We've not had big incidents, but when we've had incidents or potential incidents, they've been able to mitigate it and keep it, very minor.
So what's your engagement with like the neighbors? Do people in the community have concerns, about a facility like that? I mean, we talk a lot about, NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. Obviously,
Sure.
You've been there for 80 years. So people moved into your front yard or whatever. But do they have concerns? And do you guys engage the community to kind of help them understand all that you guys invest and all the great stuff you do to make sure that it's a safe place, to work and deliver product to your customer without endangering people in the area?
Absolutely. It's very important to do that. And we have what's called the Community Advisory Board that we meet with. We just met yesterday, actually. And
I think I got a coffee cup from the Community Advisory Board. Thank you.
Actually. You're special because not many folks outside the board get that. But no, actually.
Did you just volunteer me for a board, Frank?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, you better talk to my wife. I think I'm boarded out, but we'll see.
No, but it's a really good group. We have about 25 members. We meet bi-monthly and come in. We have a lunch and a presentation on what we're doing. And for instance, yesterday we updated them, give a business update, obviously, we give a community activities update, but we update them on our environmental improvement processes. And right now, the program that the company has is called Primavera, which is obviously meant to tie with spring.
Sure.
But it's focused on implementing projects to reduce waste and the potential impact of waste from our processes. So we have 5 particular projects that we are targeting this year in our Primavera objectives that will reduce waste to the tune of 300,000 pounds a year at our site. So we present that to the Community Advisory Board. We explain to them what we're trying to do and the progress against that. And so they understand that we're just not sitting there churning out chemicals and the waste that comes with it, and without regard for that, we're trying to reduce it. So whether it's through recycling efforts, whether it's through changing our processes to not generate the waste to begin with, which is really some of our new focus is looking at that, because we've done a lot of the recycling type efforts, and there's more that we can do, but that kind of plateaus.
You picked up a lot of the low-hanging fruit on that.
We picked up the low-hanging fruit. So now how do we change our processes fundamentally to not generate the waste to begin with? So that's what some of these projects are looking at this year, and they really appreciate it. They've walked away always very complimentary and appreciative that we're willing to share that information. And then that gets taken out to the community, right? It goes beyond. And we also talked about how, with the schools, we're doing the same thing. With the teachers, we're doing the same thing. So they understand and can bring that to their students and help them appreciate that, you can have this chemical plant here that's not far from the school operate safely, and here's why. Here's what they're doing to make sure that it is safe for the community.
How does somebody get on the community advisory board, or what is that? What does the makeup of the board look like? I mean, is it just like residents? Is it the mayor? Like who's kind of on the advisory board?
So it's a mix. We have some public officials, like economic development officials. We certainly have business leaders, Chamber of Commerce, other affiliated businesses nearby that we've invited in to the team. We have charitable organizations, their representatives on the team, because we are obviously connecting with those groups and want to support them and welcome them to participate. And then we have individuals, citizens who are just concerned about the environment. There are, in particular, 3 citizens of the area that are, whether they're part of the river preservation group or, historical preservation group, and as well as a local state rep that's very active in environmental matters that's on the advisory board. She was there yesterday, and keep a connection with her so she understands that we're trying to, work towards the concerns of her constituents, and she can take that message out to her constituents that, we're operating responsibly here for them.
How long have you guys had a community advisory board? Does it predate you? I mean, has it been a long time? Do you know the history of it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it did predate me, but it had been, somewhat dormant for the few years prior to arriving. And then about 2 years after I arrived, our leadership said, we really need to rejuvenate that. So go out, and that's how we ended up with a PR firm to help us with that and help make connections to those individuals. So the initial group, our PR consultant helped us reach out to a variety of individuals that might want to participate, and we're able to have them join and bring them into the fold.
So it's been a lot more active, say, in the last 5 years or so than it had been for a while?
Yes, absolutely.
What's the value that you guys, what's the value? I mean, listen, you're investing your time, you're a busy guy. I'm sure allnex has a lot of things to do. What's the value you see out of the community advisory board?
The value is that when allnex's name is in the community, it's thought of positively. And that's important because we're not here to be simply a manufacturing operation that's just going to generate profit and not want to be hidden in the background, this big brick and smokestack building in the background that's not concerned about the community. We want to show that we are concerned about the community. Look, our employees are residents of the community. Their families live here. They want their families to be safe. They want to be safe, and as well as anyone else who's around us. And, we feel that that's been very evident in the time that we've had this community advisory board. It's even grown much more in the last couple of years, partly because of some of the social media efforts and the connections that have come with that and have spread the word.
Yeah, that's exciting. So it sounds like it's met all of your expectations and even then some.
Very much so, yeah.
So what else do you guys do in the community? I shouldn't even say that because I know to some degree you're definitely involved kind of in the Wallingford kind of school system and what they're doing. So can you talk about that? We've had some other folks on the podcast that have been involved. I think even recently, Chris Ulbrich episode was released, and you probably know Chris. Can you just talk about kind of your involvement there and what you're doing there to engage kind of the youth and what they could do for a workforce in the future?
Yeah, so some of the main things that we do is we connect with the Wallingford schools on teacher development opportunities. We bring in the DEEP, Department of Environmental Energy and Environmental Protection, who has a group that brings continuing education to teachers through their development day process, and we sponsor that. We'll sponsor the cost of the group and the location and lunch and what have you. So they'll bring in teachers, maybe 8 to 10, 12 teachers twice a year that will help support that. And then along with that, these teachers typically want to bring their students in for tours. So we do several tours a year. Probably in the past year, we've had 60 to 80 students come through the plant.
Wow.
For tours, and whether it's because they might be science career focused and interested in that, or just in general interested in what we do at the plant. And our wastewater treatment plant seems to get a lot of interest and attention from those that are interested in environmental careers. And then as well as other groups, even beyond the Wallingford Public Schools, we've had the Spanish community of Wallingford as a group we partner with quite a bit, and they bring in their young folks, to help spur interest in careers for their cultural background, and and then as well as we've been very active with Superintendent Sal Menzo in Wallingford and his STEM program, and I know you know that he is very aggressive in promoting STEM background, STEM education and careers, and is just constantly trying to get support for that.
Energizer Bunny over there.
Energizer Bunny, and we certainly have supported. We sponsor the Hubcap Community Room, which is tied to the Wallingford STEM program, and a lot of the activities they put on are at this Hubcap Community Room, so we sponsor that for them as well. And then other activities when they've had them, certainly have, they do it was really kind of neat. They do kind of a challenge, a science challenge every year, usually during the summer, where they'll leave stations with various activities at different businesses. And, so they had a station at our site, at our plant, where the students would have to come through and do the activity and check off. And ours, they had to build a wind-powered vehicle.
Oh, nice.
And so you'd see these kids drive up. There was a little tent. They build their wind-powered vehicle, take a picture, and take it with them, and then get credit with the school that they've.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah,
that's
really
great.
Fun.
So, I just want to go back to the Primavera, because you had talked about kind of investing in these areas to reduce waste or maybe eliminate it altogether. I think that's really interesting and sort of, we talk a lot about, scrap reduction, waste reduction being a good thing. What are you guys doing in that area, and how do you manage that investment? What does that look like from a dollars perspective or a size of an investment, and how do you kind of look at the return on that investment?
Sure. So in one particular project, we have what's called a centrifuge that helps purify our product, mainly remove the salt from the product that's generated in the chemical process, because the customer doesn't want the salt. They want the pure resin, right? Well, in removing the salt, a lot of times it takes more of the resin with it. Well, besides being a cost issue, you don't want to lose good resin. That resin ends up going in a wastewater treatment plant, have to be treated, and then discharged from the wastewater treatment plant. So we actually implemented a project to do a additional wash process in that centrifuge to remove more of the resin, retain it, sell it as good product, and not have it go to the wastewater treatment plant.
Let me take a step back. So the process happens, and a resin was like a powder?
No, it's like a syrupy, almost like a maple syrup consistency. Yeah.
And so it's like so when I do the reaction, I'm going to be left with some part water, with some salt in it, which I'm not sure where that comes from, but there's some salt in it. And
It's
then
generated by the chemical
by
reaction.
the process, just salt's just one of the byproducts.
Yep.
And then I've got this like resin. So the idea is skim off or take off as much of the resin as possible.
That's right.
Leaving hopefully salt water behind.
That's right.
But the more resin I have in the salt water, the more I need to treat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that resin is full of oxygen and carbon containing compounds that you don't want to put that into the environment. So you have to break it down. And we have a biomass wastewater treatment plant that basically eats the resin and breaks it down into
Biomass water treatment plant?
Yeah, biological activated biological sludge treatment plant.
It's like bacteria or whatever that eats the stuff that's in the water.
Water bears. Water bears are the best type.
Water bears?
Water bears, that's right. They're a special type of bacteria that you want to have because they do a good job of eating that resin. But the point is, let's not send them down there. Let's not send the resin to the water bears. We'll keep the water bears healthy when we need them, but we don't want them to have to eat too much resin. We want to keep the resin and sell it. And that's what this process did. It was about a $500,000 project that we installed a couple years ago, and it's working pretty well and getting to the point where we're able to recover a lot more of that product and not send it down there.
And so that product, I mean, listen, what tremendous ROI, right? Because you got the products already being made. You're doing all the work to make it, and then you got to pay to clean it. So if we can, so we can swipe it out of there, we can get more to sell and less to clean.
Absolutely, that's the concept.
That's pretty exciting. So what else? I mean, what else are you guys working on? I mean, what's kind of the next frontier in kind of the greenification of the process, as it were?
Yeah, well, some of the other things we've done is we've recycled more of our waste streams that in the past were not economical to recycle, such as dilute alcohol streams that, we use alcohol in our processing and want to recover the alcohol. But at times it gets to a certain concentration that it's just not worth recovering. So sending it to the wastewater treatment plant and having the wastewater plant consume it, the biomass consume it, made more sense. Well, now we're saying, even though it's not necessarily economically beneficial, we want to do it from an environmental standpoint. So we're recovering these dilute alcohol streams now. And there's more that we still haven't been able to successfully recover that we're working on recovering.
When you recover, what does that mean? Like instead of it going to the
Recycling
wastewater?
it, we take it, we'll have to distill it, boil off the non-alcohol water salt components and then recover the
use the alcohol for like cleaning, or what's the?
No, alcohol is actually part of the processing.
Oh, it's like one of the reactors.
Part of the reactor. It's kind of a carrier for the material that's being turned into resin.
Got it.
Then the other thing that we did neatly
Trying so hard to remember my like junior year high school chemistry class, Frank. It's
Hey,
tough, man.
No,
I'm digging hard in those memory banks.
Sure, if you're not in it every day, it's hard.
It's tough. It's tough.
Remember. But the other thing that we did, even though it's not necessarily as much on the recovery side, what it is on the limiting the emission side. So our wastewater treatment plant has this big basin called the equalization basin on the inlet, where everything just dumps in and mixes, right? And before it gets sent to the biomass, you want to have it to be very consistent. And it's like a 2 million gallon EQ basin, big pond looking
Right.
basin. So it sits there, and in the past, you have this layer and the sun beats on it, and there's evaporation, and the alcohols evaporate off, so there are emissions, right?
Yep.
We're permitted for that, not illegally, and not really dangerous, but not the best thing. You don't want to have alcohol evaporating into the environment. So we were going to build a dome over it to enclose it and retain the alcohol, retain the solvents, and not have it evaporate off. Well, the reality is building a dome over a 2 million gallon pond in Connecticut with snow, with winter, not the easiest thing to do and not very cheap, right? Well, one of our engineers came up with, he
can't just like throw a plastic bag over it, call it a day?
Close, actually very close. So out in the West where they're trying to preserve water, right, because of water conservation concerns, on their water reservoirs, they float these black plastic balls that look like wiffle balls, except they don't have holes in them. They're just solid black plastic balls. And it covers the reservoir.
I was kind of right.
And prevents the water from evaporating. So the same concept here. We're not trying to preserve the water. We're trying to keep the solvent, the alcohols, in the EQ basin so that eventually they'll get to the biomass and the biomass can consume them and not evaporate off. So we installed 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now, we installed the first layer of these balls, 320,000 balls, plastic balls. And it did a good job of reducing the first layer of reduction, which was 30,000 pounds a year of emissions eliminated.
That's significant.
Right? But then, balls are spheres. And as you put balls together, you still have some gaps, right? So the idea was, hey, how about we put a second layer on there? So last June, we bought the second layer and installed the second layer on there. And that reduced it, obviously less of a reduction now because you have less space you're trying to prevent from evaporating, another 6,000 pounds a year. So in the past 5.5 years, we've installed 620,000 plastic balls on our EQ basin and have reduced emissions by 36,000 pounds a year of solvents. And it's amazing because they just sit there. You almost look like you can walk on them. Don't try it at home.
Not recommended.
And it's been very effective and very cost effective compared to building a dome over the facility. I
can imagine. How often you got to replace the plastic balls? Like they just
very rarely. They just sit there. Every now and then you'll see a little gap open up, and you'll have to throw in a few more, but not.
How do you get the liquid in?
The liquid comes in subsurface.
Subsurface. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. That was really neat. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are trying some cool stuff. And so what's on the horizon? What's next? What's in the pipeline? To take to the next level.
So the next level again is going back to how do we reduce the waste to begin with. So the resin was one example of recovering it through the alcohol wash from the centrifuge. But there's other systems. We have filter systems that we want to prevent from having to wash to. Right now, we have to wash more than we'd like to. That sends some resin to the wastewater treatment plant. So the concept there is how do we recover more of that wash and resin as opposed to having to send it down. So don't have really perfect solutions yet, but we have some concepts we're studying that hopefully will bear some fruit there. And then go back to changing the actual chemistry of the process to where maybe we don't generate as much of that salt, reduce the amount of salt that's generated. So the less that's generated, the less resin that attaches to it that you have to worry about recovering and generate less waste in the long run. And then some of the basic just water conservation, energy reduction. We've done a great deal on energy reduction where if you end up using more energy, you're likely wasting more water, steam, condensate, what have you. So if you reduce the amount of energy you're utilizing to begin with and generating to begin with, you have less waste going to the waste.
Which also means you're spending less to make the product in the first place, so you get some return there. That's right. As you're talking about this, sort of reminds me a little bit. It's a little bit closer to my world in terms of like software development. Sometimes if you just have a lot of storage capacity on your computer and a lot of memory, you get a little bit. I don't know, lazy is not the right word, but a little bit inefficient, maybe a little lax kind of in your like strict development standards. You're like, we don't have to spend time really doing it the most efficient way possible. We can just throw some more RAM at it or whatever. So it sounds like kind of going the other way and saying, something, if we look at the process itself, maybe we can streamline the process up front to actually have less inputs, which means if we have less inputs, we're going to have less outputs. And then we can sort of save money on the front end and save money on the back end.
Absolutely perfect analogy. That's right.
Well, there you go. I've been listening, Frank. See that? Right. So, I'm interested to understand on the business perspective, I kind of take that approach to it, which is, listen, it's no secret to anybody that United States in general, in the northeastern United States, isn't the least expensive place in the world to do business. Certainly, in some ways, it would probably be less responsible and less environmentally friendly, but cheaper to just throw your waste out the back door and not treat it and worry about plastic balls and anything else. So when you do have to compete, and I know this is a global world, right? We're not competing with other parts of the United States as much as we're competing with other parts of the world. How do you guys find the business strength or the business case to make all these investments and make them pay off? Like, is there enough velocity gained? Or I don't know enough about the business, but how do you do all this and compete against China or Mexico or Singapore or wherever? I don't know where else they make resins, but
so it's definitely a constant challenge. It's something that's on our radar all the time, and that I get asked about from my business directors and my manufacturing director and what have you. But the bottom line is to have a competitive edge. Mm-hmm. What do you do different than someone else doesn't do that makes you better? And that's what we've done, is to develop these products that we, because of our technological capability, because the equipment we have, because of the talent that we have here in Wallingford, are able to do better than anybody else and give the customer what they want, very specific, very unique, that others can't do. So we're able to make some products here competitively, and the main one that is right now front and center is a new formaldehyde-free product. So most resins are historically made with formaldehyde, and still are, which obviously there's concerns about formaldehyde and its effects. But now we're making resins without formaldehyde that are just as functional, and in some cases better than the formaldehyde-containing resins, and that there aren't many people making that in the world. In fact, in the U.S., there's no one else making it. And we're even able to sell that product competitively in China, which is quite interesting. If you can imagine, a chemical plant in New England competing on a product in China, how is that possible, right? But we are. We're doing that right now, and we're continuing to look at other products that as well will be able to do that. So we have a certain niche. We're able to have this unique product line capability that's where that's our strength, and that's where we're able to prosper, and not in the commodities or the products that others can make, in large quantities very easily and cheaply.
Love that. So, I think that's a great kind of entree into, something that's near and dear to my heart. We talk about it a lot on the podcast, workforce. We talked a little bit about the technology, investing in the technology, both on the front end of the product and in the cleanup. But, and technology is great and all that. And believe me, I'm a huge technology fan. But at the end of the day, it's the people that are operating that technology and executing it. That's really what makes the difference. You know what I mean? You need to have someone that knows how to operate it. You've got those people in Wallingford right now. I guess let's talk a little bit about what's it like to work at allnex, and what do you see for kind of growth of workforce or people that you're looking for, and what you'd like to see in terms of the workforce there.
Yeah. So historically, the site has had, individuals who came in mostly not without a college education. Some have, and who just worked hard and were trained well and learned through years and years of experience how to make these products and do it well. And they've aged, and the silver tsunami, and there a lot of those folks, many who have 35, 40, 45 years of experience. We have one gentleman that's been working midnight shift for 45 years, and oh, by the way, leaves midnight shift and goes and works a job as a handyman during the day. It's incredible. I don't know how he does it, but his experience, his attention to detail, and understanding of the process is incredible. And the reality is it's just striking when I think about the number of events that have to go right during the course of the day to make products successfully, cost effectively, and safely. Is just mind-boggling. It's literally thousands of individual events a day that have to happen. And these guys, they're able to manage that and make sure that those thousands of events go off right. They have to virtually bat 1,000 all the time, and they do that. And the challenge now is that passing that now into the next generation. And we do have somewhat of a split workforce now, a bipolar workforce, I guess you can say, where you have the 40, 45-year guys who are starting to phase out, and now we have a large influx of younger, less experienced guys and gals who are coming in and learning these processes and doing a good job because, A, they're able to glean, pick up the knowledge from the experienced folks, and then we're intentionally putting in really focused, detailed training programs to make sure that they understand how the process works. That wasn't always done in the past. In the past, it was more of teaching the steps, teaching the actions, and not the technology and the theory and the background behind it. But now we're doing both, and I think that's how we equip the next generation of workforce to be even more effective if possible, or certainly as effective as our experienced workforce.
And so what do you guys do? I mean, you mentioned the silver tsunami. So, what kind of replacement workforce are you looking for, say, over the next 5 years, do you anticipate?
So obviously what we really like is someone that has, an aptitude mechanically, being mechanically inclined, be able to understand computers, control systems. That's very important now, which it wasn't 30, 40 years ago, but now it's critical. And, if we're able to get folks with a science background, chemistry, biology, physical science background, that's great. It's not essential. We're able to train individuals enough that they can overcome that, but it certainly helps if they have some of that coming in. But we've gotten a mix. We've gotten some that have a background in the science fields and others that haven't, but who show a great work ethic and show that they're going to be good employees that can learn anything, and we're able to train them up to be successful.
What's it like to work at allnex?
So it's really fun. I mean, it's a family atmosphere. There are literally multi-generational 2- and 3-generation families there. But everyone really, appreciates and works well together. And I know that may be cliche and everyone likes to say that, but I've worked, several places as we talked about, and they've all been good places to work. But truly, I feel here that everyone is really looking out for each other, and that's evident by the fact that we've gone over 2 years, almost 2.5 years without an injury at the site. And it's because people really care about each other and want to make sure that their coworkers are operating safely. And you come in, you have really interesting, a given day you can have a new and surprising challenge. But at the end of the day, we really are successful because folks work together as a team very well.
And talk about some of the stuff. What kind of stuff do you guys do to build camaraderie at allnex?
So yeah, we have every day we have toolbox meetings and what we call morning market meetings in our control rooms, and where our operators are operating the control systems, where we talk through everything that they need to know for the day. Very transparent, very open about what's going on today. What processes are running, what maintenance are we doing, what visitors are coming, why are these visitors coming, what important initiatives are out there, what new products are we looking at. So we call it morning market, and it just gives everyone, inform them, give them the tools and the empowerment to do their job effectively. And then we also do fun stuff. Obviously, we celebrate anytime we have successes. We celebrated our safety records with nice jackets, and we celebrated an environmental record with these nice coffee tumblers, and meals. We're always having good lunches when we have reason to celebrate, and and then we have great activities like a really nice Christmas party that we put on every year, engaging families. We did a great community open house a couple of years ago, where everyone was able to bring in their families. The community was welcome to come. We did tours of the site. We had a lot of giveaways. So, a lot of these folks who have worked there 20, 30 years, 40 years, their families have kind of grown up with us. And I think we see that's a big part of our success.
What do you like best about working there?
I like the fact that I can be myself. I can be the type of person I want to be, as a not just as a leader, but as a coworker, as a colleague, and you don't have to be anything else. You can. It's really we're just really truly sincere, engaged with each other. My best friends are there, and I enjoy working with them, and I enjoy having fun. We work hard, play hard is the way I like to say it, and. Like I said, it's always interesting. There's never a lack of challenges and a lack of new things to face, but we all work together to come out successful.
That's awesome. Listen, my experience is as goes the leader, goes the rest of the facility. So if it operates the way you operate, Frank, I think anybody would be really honored and privileged to work there. So that'd be awesome.
Well, thank you. I'm lucky to have the team that I have. Really, that helps me and everyone at the site.
Well, there you go. I think I'm going to leave it on that high note, and I'm going to move to our rapid fire round of questions. All right, you ready to go?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Yankees.
Oh, I had such a good Red Sox streak going, Frank. You're killing me. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Kind of split on that. About the same of both.
All
But
right.
I had a Starbucks before I came here, so I guess I have to say Starbucks.
And when you travel, you guys prefer staycation, or when you take time off, you prefer staycation or exotic destination?
Exotic.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Well, I drive a Fiat Spider, so sports car.
Sports car. If you had to do something other than be the site manager for allnex, what would you do?
I always wanted to be a writer, journalist, sports journalist. That was kind of my interest, but I eat too much, so I had to find a little more stable career.
Do you have a favorite business book?
Who Moved My Cheese?
That's a great one that no one's brought up yet. What's something that you think you learned early in your career, early in your life, Frank, that kind of inspired you to the success that you've had?
It's all about people. I grew up in an Italian restaurant family, and I worked in the restaurant business as a young, even before high school, really. And I had a mentor, one of my uncles, who was one of the owners, that just really taught me that you have to treat people right. You have to engage them and make them feel like you value them. And it's the same thing no matter whether you're working in a restaurant or holding a podcast or making chemicals. It's the same thing. There's no magic to it.
Be good to people. I like that. What's something that you think you learned later in your career, Frank, or later in your life that if you went back and told young Frank and he listened to you, you think it'd make a real big impact on him?
Yeah, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. But, if you don't try, you may not know that the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
So sometimes got to take that opportunity and roll those dice to see what happens.
Yeah, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
There you go. I like that. Well, listen, it's been awesome having you on. We've talked about a lot of stuff. I got a bunch of notes on the bottom of my page, which is always a good sign. But I like to kind of leave at the end. When you cover a lot of stuff, it's hard to execute on all these different topics. And so someone was just kind of listening at the end here and thinking, what's one thing that they could take away from this? And if they execute it, it will have a positive impact on their life or on their business. What do you think that we talked about today? What's one thing you think would be great for them to take away?
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to leave with that's maybe more specific to what I do is that you can really run a complex, challenging, and what in the past has sometimes be looked at as dangerous or risky manufacturing operation, like a chemical manufacturing operation. You can do it very safely, you can do it very successfully, and you can do it in a way that can be profitable, but be responsible and be a good part of the community. Those that say you can't do that, they just haven't tried hard enough and haven't really looked at how to do it. And you can do it. And I've seen it not just here, I've seen it in other stops along the way that it can be done.
That's awesome. I listen. I actually think that's the best one of all. We try and give one from the guests and one from me. That was a great one. I think the other thing is something that we didn't maybe talk about sort of directly, but we roundabout did it. And I think it's always instructive not to always listen to what people say, but watch what they do. And I think looking at what you've done, since you've arrived, which was sort of show up at a site with an idea of how can we, I don't know if reinvigorate's the right word, but invigorate the site and make it kind of a shining star. And you obviously achieved that as being one of the top 2 sites in the U.S. And I just see you out there engaging the community, coming on the podcast, the community board, advisory board, going in with the school system, and really like being proactive, leaning in to make something happen. And you look back after 8.5 years and it's amazing what you've achieved. And I think that's a great lesson that people can sort of take, which is, we often overestimate what we can get done, say, in a day, but underestimate what we can get done in several years. And I think your life's a proof of that. It's been inspiring for me to get to know you and see what you've done. And I think people could really get inspired and take that to heart.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, that's why it's been so rewarding for me while I've been here.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's awesome to have you up here in Connecticut. Glad you guys got the roots. Look forward to having you around a whole lot more. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your views with us.
Thank you very much, Ari.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.